Listen closely, because what you are watching unfold on the mainstream networks right now is only about 10% of the actual picture. The talking heads are obsessing over the kinetic visuals, the USS Spruance blowing a hole in the MV Tusca, the US Marines fast roping onto the deck, the sheer Hollywood spectacle of a high seas seizure. But if you're only looking at the surface, you're missing the profound tectonic shift happening right underneath it. What we are witnessing is not a localized skirmish. It is the execution of a highly classified, multi-domain doctrine designed to completely castrate an entire geopolitical axis without initiating a traditional ground war. Let's strip away the noise and look at the battlefield geometry. Why did the United States wait for these vessels to enter the Gulf of Oman before striking? The media won't explain this to you, but the tactical brilliance here is staggering. The Strait of Hormuz is barely 21 miles wide at its narrowest choke point. In that claustrophobic maritime corridor, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps the URG holds an asymmetric advantage. They have spent 3 decades building a mosquito fleet of fast attack craft, stockpiling over 5,000 magnetic naval mines, and burying Gadir-class midget submarines in shallow waters. If the U.S. Navy tried to enforce a blockade inside the strait itself, they would be fighting in a phone booth against an adversary armed to the teeth with cheap, disposable swarm weapons. But Washington didn't take the bait. Instead, they shifted the kill zone to the open waters of the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. Out there, the phone booth disappears. Out there, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer has a 360-degree, unimpeded radar horizon. The U.S. Navy traded a confined knife fight for an open sniper duel, instantly nullifying 80% of Iran's coastal defense strategy. It is a calculated geographical displacement of the conflict that strips Tehran of its home field advantage. Now let's talk about the absolute most terrifying weapon the Pentagon has deployed to the region, and no, it's not the F-35s or the aircraft carriers. It's the invisible digital net. Washington has activated Task Force 59, and they have effectively turned the Gulf into the world's largest, most lethal biometric scanner. They are using AI-driven unmanned surface vessels and drones to map the acoustic signature, the thermal footprint, and the hull profile of every single piece of floating metal in the region. Do you understand what that means for the shadow economy? For years, Iranian tankers have evaded sanctions by turning off their AIS transponders, painting over their names, or flying false flags. That era ended 48 hours ago. You can change your flag, you can turn off your GPS, but you cannot change the acoustic frequency of your propeller blades chopping through the water. The AI dragnet recognizes the sound. The moment a rogue tanker enters a 50-mile radius, the algorithms flag it, an MQ for seat right and drone paints it, and a boarding team is dispatched. The United States hasn't just blockaded the water. They have digitized the ocean. They have made it mathematically impossible for Tehran to hide. So why go to these historic, unprecedented lengths right now? Why risk a regional conflagration? To understand that, you have to follow the money, and you have to look east. This blockade is framed as a response to Iranian aggression, but the underlying geopolitical objective is the absolute strangulation of the axis of resistance and a direct shot across the bow of Beijing. 90% of Iran's economy is sustained by maritime trade, primarily exporting 1.5 to 2 million barrels of heavily discounted, sanctioned oil a day almost entirely to China. This illicit oil revenue is the lifeblood that funds Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and the proxy militias in Iraq and Syria. By dropping a steel curtain across the Gulf of Oman, Washington isn't just punishing Tehran. They are turning off the financial faucet for the entire Middle Eastern resistance network. If this blockade holds at 90% efficiency, Iran's regional influence will literally go bankrupt within a financial quarter. They won't be able to afford the drone engines, the ballistic missile parts, or the payroll for their proxy armies. It is an economic kill switch. But let's be brutally honest about the blowback, because the Western public is about to pay a severe price for this masterstroke. You cannot pull 2 million barrels of oil out of the global shadow market without triggering a macroeconomic shockwave. The panic routing of commercial tankers we are already seeing will compound global shipping costs. Within weeks, you are going to see a severe spike at the gas pump across the United States and Europe. Just as the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank thought they were taming inflation, this energy shock threatens to rip the wound wide open. The administration knows this. They have calculated that the temporary economic pain for Western consumers is a necessary sacrifice to permanently break Tehran's geopolitical spine. And that brings us to the most critical, underreported element of this entire crisis: the emergency negotiations in Islamabad and Donald Trump's chilling ultimatum. when the former and highly influential U.S. leader broadcasts to the world that there are no more good guys and threatens to systematically dismantle every power plant. And bridge in Iran, it is not just rhetoric. It is a psychological warfare operation running in tandem with the military blockade. Tehran is currently backed into an impossible, binary corner. On one side of the table in Islamabad, they are staring at economic asphyxiation. Their tankers are idling, their revenue has flatlined, and their regime's internal stability is sitting on a powder keg of domestic unrest. On the other side of the table, they are staring at the USS Gerald R. Ford, 90 strike aircraft, and the threat of Tomahawk missiles turning their critical infrastructure into a parking lot. They thought closing the Strait of Hormuz was their ultimate trump card. Instead, Washington took that card, ripped it in half, and locked them inside their own vault. The next 72 hours in Islamabad will dictate the trajectory of the 21st century. Tehran must capitulate, open the strait, and crawl to the nuclear negotiating table, or they will watch the total economic and physical dismantling of their state on live television. We are on the precipice, and the dominoes have already started to fall.